Welcome back, Packers fans. My name is Paul Brettel. For those of you tuning in for the first time, I'm the site editor over at Dairyland Express, where we cover the Packers, Brewers, Bucks, and Badgers. I also have a new article out over at Cheesehead TV every Monday and Friday. As it says at the bottom of the screen, you can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel. As you can see, we got the back wall done. Took a little bit longer than anticipated, but I have to say, I absolutely love how it turned out. I think it really enhances these videos as well, and I just absolutely love it. So for today's video, I want to talk about a couple of topics. One, the Green Bay Packers salary cap and how it points to them making another addition in recent moves that they've made. Two, I want to talk about the wide receiver group because especially with the addition of Randall Cobb, it is very congested. And then at the end, I'm just going to go over some quick rundown of some training camp observations. Obviously, there are more out there, but these are the big ones that have stood out to me and what I want to touch on briefly. But first, let's circle back to the Green Bay Packers and their salary cap. So it's been clear since free agency began that this Green Bay Packers team is going all in. Now, all in, their version of all in might not look like what you want it to or what most fans think it's going to look like or what it should look like, but this is the Green Bay Packers going all in, especially financially. This team from last season, I know they lost in the NFC Championship game. I know it was in heartbreaking fashion once again, but they were absolutely good enough to win the Super Bowl. This was one of, if not the best team in the NFL for much of the regular season. Being able to win a Super Bowl and not performing in the NFC Championship game are two different things. This team was capable of winning. They unfortunately just didn't play their best game when they needed to, but that doesn't mean they weren't capable of it. You could look at the 2019 Green Bay Packers that went to the NFC Championship game in San Francisco. You could look at that team, first year LaFleur offense, and say they probably weren't good enough to win a Super Bowl. In the regular season, they had a lot of close wins. Their 13-3 record was often mocked and saying that they weren't that good. You can look at that team, and if you want to say they weren't good enough to win a Super Bowl, not really going to argue with you on that one. But last year's team absolutely was. So Brian Gutekunst, Russ Ball, they did everything in their power to keep this team together for what hopefully ends up being another Super Bowl push. The only real significant loss was Corey Linsley. They also lost Jamal Williams. But to do that, they had to rework a number of contracts. The salary cap fell from $198.2 million to just $182.5 million. So Green Bay went on a restructuring spree, an added voided years spree to get under the salary cap, keep these players around, but also leave themselves enough room to make some additions. So a restructure, if you're unfamiliar with it, what it does is it takes a portion of the base salary, converts it to a signing bonus. Signing bonus is cash. The player gets that right up front. Players like restructures. You get your cash right up front. But it allows the team to then spread that cap hit from the signing bonus out over the life of the deal. So let's take, for example, let's say it's a $12 million base salary, and the team converts $9 million of it to a signing bonus. So instead of that $9 million from the base salary all coming due in 2021 and all being on the 2021 salary cap sheet, they're able to spread it out over the life of the deal. So if this is a deal with 3 years left, they can go 3 million, 3 million, 3 million, rather than having to take all 9 million in the current calendar year. So that's what the Green Bay Packers did with a number of deals. They just recently did it with Aaron Rodgers, Billy Turner, Mason Crosby, Adrian Amos, Zadarius Smith. The list really goes on and on. They did it quite often. Another thing that they did was they added voided years to the deal. So on paper, that adds another year to the life of the contract. So an example of this recently would be Randall Cobb. Randall Cobb's deal ends in 2022. That's when it actually ends. But the Green Bay Packers added a voided year in 2023. So now when they restructured his deal, they had 2022 to spread the cap charges to, and they also had 2023. That's a fake year. Cobb's deal doesn't run out in 2023. It still runs out in 2022. This is really just an accounting measure and on paper measure to help spread the cap hit out. Next offseason, when he's eventually cut, which he's going to be, the Green Bay Packers save, I believe, $6 million in cap space. Those cap charges that they pushed to the voided year in 2023 are going to accelerate and all come due next year. It's a way to, this is the textbook definition of kicking the can down the road. That's what the Green Bay Packers did all offseason. according to Ken Ingalls, salary cap guru over on Packers Twitter. The Green Bay Packers pushed over $26 million worth of cap charges from 2021 to 2022. Again, that was their effort to keep this really, really good football team together. And you go up and down this roster, it's very talented. Now, the issue with that is it creates space now, which is good. They needed it. As I said, they're all in. They're trying to make a run. But those cap charges got to come due at some point. And right now, according to Over the Cap, the team is about $51 million over the projected 2022 salary cap. Of course, there are ways to create cap space. There's veteran cuts. When their dead cap hit is lower than their cap hit, they can restructure again. They can extend players. An extension, similarly to a restructure, helps sprinkle those cap charges out over the life of the deal, except this time you add real years onto the contract. So Jair Alexander next offseason is going to be a prime example of someone who's going to receive an extension. Perhaps Zadarius Smith does, perhaps Adrian Amos does. But my point with this is that there are measures that they can take. But as Brian Gutekunst said, there's going to be financial pain. Those were his words, financial pain in 2022. And this team is going to look different. There are going to be contributors, several contributors from this year's team who are going to be gone. As I said, this is what all-in looks like. Green Bay Packers push their chips to the middle of the table to keep this very talented team together. And next season, they're going to have a lot of difficult financial decisions to make. I know coming into this offseason, there was a lot of discussion around the salary cap and the tough decisions, tough moves that were going to have to be made. Really, the way it's shaping up, this offseason is going to look pretty tame compared to what next year could look like. So I say all that to say this. The Green Bay Packers have room for another addition, and they're going to make one. With the restructure of Aaron Rodgers' contract, again, that pushed more money to 2022. The restructure of Randall Cobb's deal, that again pushed more money to 2022. According to Over the Cap, the Green Bay Packers have just over $13 million in available cap space this year yet. Now, there are some unaccounted for expenses. One, the salary cap projections only take into account the top 51 players on the roster, so the top 51 contracts. So, as we all know, there's 53 players on an active roster. So there's at least $1.5 million left that still has to be paid for and accounted for in that $13 million cap figure. If we assume that the last two players on the roster are signed for league minimums. On top of that, there's also the practice squad. That's not accounted for either. So that's another expense, maybe in the $3-4 million range. So if we take those expenses off, the Green Bay Packers are still roughly sitting $7 or $8 million under the salary cap. They didn't have to restructure Randall Cobb's deal. If they had just left it as was, his $5.2 million base salary came over here, this would fit into what they've already done. But I believe that they restructured it because they're looking to make another move. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to happen in the next week. It doesn't mean it's going to be a huge name that we all know and have been waiting for them to sign. Chances are it's going to be neither of those. It's going to be someone on perhaps a veteran minimum contract that only costs $1 million or $2 million, but it's someone who can help this team. Maybe it comes in free agency. Maybe it comes at the trade deadline. Like I said, it's not going to be not likely going to be in the next week. It could be a month from now, could be 2 months from now. But either way, the Green Bay Packers, with their cap situation, going all in, pushing money to 2022, the restructure of Rodgers' deal or restructure of Cobb's deal, it's clear they're making space to have the flexibility to make another move, and I believe they're going to at some point. Like I said, could be a free agent, could be a trade, but another move is coming because it's clear this team's all in. It is very, very, very likely that this is Rodgers' last season. Listening to his press conference, just how this whole offseason unfolded, I don't see him coming back. The Packers know this is their best opportunity, at least in the short term. We don't know what's going to happen with Jordan Love, how he's going to look, what the team's going to even look like next year. But in the short term, this is their best opportunity to win. And hey, credit to them. They're going for it. They are absolutely going for it. The topic is the wide receiver position. So this was already going to be an intriguing positional group to keep our eyes on this summer, but now even more so. So with the additional Randall Cobb, there's basically 5 receiver spots locked up. Randall Cobb, Amari Rodgers, Devin Funchess, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, or not Devin Funchess, excuse me. It's getting ahead of myself. Devontae Adams, Allen Lazard, MVS, Randall Cobb, and Amari Rodgers. Those 5 are locks. They are going to be on the team. And if we look back at last year's initial 53-man roster, the Green Bay Packers kept 5 receivers. So there is a very real possibility that the wide receiver room right now is set. Now, that doesn't mean they can't keep 6 or they won't keep 6. If we look at last year's roster, Tyler Ervin was kept on as a running back, although he filled in as a receiver often, lining up in the slot, being a pass-catching option. So maybe the Green Bay Packers only keep 3 running backs this year and allocate that extra roster position to the receiver, keeping 6. Maybe they only keep 2 quarterbacks this year, Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love, after they kept 3 last year. Again, there's another way to create a roster spot to keep 6 receivers. Now, I will say as much of or as congested as this back end of the receiver room is, I don't see them keeping 7 whatsoever. The big reason being the 5 receivers I listed as roster locks, they're going to see a bulk of the snaps at the receiver position. You also have A.J. Dillon, Aaron Jones at running back as pass catchers. You have a slew of tight ends, up potentially 5 that could be on the roster, but at least 4 that are pass catching options as well can affect the passing game. There's really no reason for them to keep 7 wide receivers. So I think 7's out of the question. The real debate is it 5? If that's the case, receiver room set. If they keep 6, then we got some competition. So then that leads us in our next discussion point with this. Who do you keep? Right now, I see it shaking down to the 3 players. There's Devin Funchess, Juwan Winfrey, Malik Taylor, and Equanimeous St. Brown. 4 players, miscounted. 4 players who have a shot at that 6 wide receiver spot. So we then get into the, discussion debate of, would the Green Bay Packers keep 6 receivers and have none of them provide any sort of coverage ability in special teams? If they keep Devin Funchess, who in a vacuum, compared to those other 3 receivers, he's easily the more talented receiver, easily the most productive receiver of that group. That's not even a question. But he hasn't played in 2 seasons. How quickly does he shake off the rust? How quickly does he gel with Aaron Rodgers? How quickly does he pick up the Matt LaFleur offense? These are all questions. Training camp's a weekend. We obviously don't know the answers to those yet. We'll have to see how things unfold. But if he does show out, if he does make the final roster or have an opportunity to, would the Green Bay Packers keep 6 receivers who don't contribute to the coverage unit? I know Amari Rodgers and Randall Cobb can be return men, but that's not a coverage ability. They're going to be return men. Those aren't gunners. Those aren't guys running downfield trying to make tackles on kick and punt return units or kick and punt coverage units. So that's a big question there. That's not a typical practice that you see. Typically, there's going to be at least 1, sometimes even 2 receivers who are going to contribute to that part of special teams. So if the Green Bay Packers did keep Devin Funchess as the 6th, that would be a bit of an unconventional route. Then you go to the opposite end of the spectrum where you have someone like Malik Taylor, who of this group is by far the most experienced special teams player. He took 210 special team snaps in 2020 alone. However, on the offensive side, he has very little experience. So far through minicamp and training camp, he's made very little headway noise on that front on the offensive side of the ball. So really you'd be keeping him strictly as a special teams contributor. And that's not unheard of or out of the question either. You just know that you're not going to rely heavily on him to contribute to the offense. But again, the 5 receivers ahead of him, tight ends, running backs, that shouldn't be a need either. So I think Malik Taylor could make the roster for that reason, just because of his special teams ability. Somewhere in the middle of Devin Funchess and Malik Taylor is Juwan Winfrey. Juwan Winfrey only has 70 career special team snaps, but a big reason for that is because he's just been a practice squad player during his first 2 NFL seasons. When he's been on the active roster, I believe he's been on the active roster between Denver and Green Bay last year for 5 or 6 games. He has those 70 snaps over that span. So he's been a special teams contributor when on the active roster. So that's not a concern with him, although he is a bit inexperienced compared to Malik Taylor. On the flip side, on the offensive ball, between minicamp, this first week of training camp, it just seems like every single day, Juwan Winfrey is making plays on the offensive side of the ball. So between that, showing his special teams contributions that he could potentially make. He's kind of that happy medium and someone that I'd really keep my eyes on. Then we come to Equanimeous St. Brown, and compared to the other three, I think he's just the odd man out. Like I said, Funchess is the most talented receiver of this bunch. Malik Taylor has the most special teams experience, and Juwan Winfrey gives you the best of both worlds. Equanimeous St. Brown, haven't heard much of him through camp. He's not a special teams contributor, or at least not up to this point in his career. Same goes for Funchess. He hasn't been either. I'm not going to say that they can't turn it around or can't be put in that position, but we just haven't seen it yet. So of the four, I think EQ has the toughest uphill battle. But I say all that just to point out this is a tough decision. Do you keep 5? Do you keep 6? Do you prioritize special teams? Do you want a bit of both? Do you just go all in on the offensive side of the ball and keep Devin Funchess? So those are tough questions that Matt LaFleur is going to have to make decisions on. Ultimately, it's a good problem to have. They have a lot of talent at the position, and that's what leads to difficult decisions. So it's a good problem to have. There's still a lot of time for these things to play out. Maybe a month from now or 2 weeks from now, it's not such a tough decision. And we know, they're just going to stick with 5, or Juwan Winfrey is still balling. We're going to keep him. So we'll see that get worked out as more practices unfold, the preseason games begin. But right now, it's up in the air. And if you ask 10 different people who your 6 receivers are going to be, you're probably going to get a number of different responses. So lastly, for today's show, I just want to run through some training camp observations that have been made up to this point. So Josh Myers, the rookie center, Aaron Rodgers said that he is really impressing. And that's fantastic news to hear, because this offensive line unit, once again, just like it was last year, is going to be really, really good. And if Josh Myers can be that reliable starter this season right away, it's just going to make this unit so much better. And honestly, the outlook for them moving forward in the years to come is going to be tremendous as well. So fantastic news to hear. 2 guys on the hot seat who we have not heard much from, Josh Jackson and Oren Burks. I haven't heard about Oren Burks at all. When I've been at the practices, he hasn't stood out whatsoever. Jackson in coverage, he's still taking his lumps, just as he has since his rookie season. So those 2 are on the hot seat, and as of now anyways, still early, but as of now, not performing as they should be. The starting offensive line unit with the ones in practice without David Bakhtiari has been Elton Jenkins at left tackle, then moving to the right, John Runyon, Josh Myers, Lucas Patrick, and Billy Turner. The linebackers, the primary linebackers getting the most reps with the ones as Devondre Campbell and Chris Barnes. Makes a lot of sense. Campbell, he is just a well-rounded linebacker, long, can affect the passing game, solid blitzer, good against the run. He's not flashy, he's not special in any one area, but he's solid in all 3 phases and can be a 3-down linebacker. Chris Barnes, we saw him last year. Very reliable, sure tackler, good against the run. Can hold his own in coverage, but wore the green dot as well. Kamal Martin of the 3 has the most upside, but needs to rein it in as well. It's fun watching him fly around the field, but he's got to play with more control, because there are a lot of missed opportunities, missed plays last season because of that. Recklessness is a little too strong of a word, but you get where I'm going with it. Next up, the slot position. We know that that's one of the big question marks this season. Who's going to be in the slot? Is it going to be Jair, Darnell Savage? Is someone else going to step forward? Well, so far it's been Shannon Sullivan. He was the Green Bay Packers' primary slot corner last season, and so far with the defense, with the ones, that's been his role again. Eric Stokes, he is getting tested. With Jair Alexander, he was out of practice on Saturday. He left Friday's practice early. Nothing serious. He was back on Monday, but the team session on Saturday, he sat out, and they put Eric Stokes in against Davante Adams and said, figure it out, Rook. And really, that's the best way for him to learn. But as you can imagine, Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams picked on the poor rookie in his, what I can only imagine was a welcome to the NFL moment. Some good news on the running back front. Patrick Taylor was taken off of the physically unable to perform list. He's someone that I've talked about, written about for a few months now, because I've really had my eyes on him, and I think he's a very good fit for this offense. Both he's an effective runner coming out of Memphis, a willing blocker, someone who can affect the passing game as well in that regard. So I know Kylan Hill's got the attention, And by the way, he looks really good as well. But keep your eyes on Patrick Taylor. He's a really good fit. And let's not overlook the fact that he's been in this offense for a year. I know he is injured. I know he was in the practice field often in 2020, but he was still absorbing the offense, learning his responsibilities. We shouldn't overlook that as well. And like I said, I think he's a really good fit. Lastly, Henry Black. So the third safety spot is up for grabs. We know it's going to be Darnell Savage. We know it's going to be Adrian Amos. But Henry Black has primarily been the third safety when the Packers do have three on the field. So something to keep our eyes on moving forward. So that was my quick rundown. That was my thoughts on the salary cap, going all in, the wide receiver position. We'll be back with another video in the coming days. Until then, take care, everyone. Stay safe. And as always, go Pack, go.